Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be back here again. I'm glad for the chance to talk about one of my favorite subjects on Earth, and also one that is very apposite for this gathering, which is flight itself, and what's next when we come to the world of flight. And one of the themes I'd like to get at in this session is about the romance of flight, the dream of flight, the idea of flight, which through most of the millennia of human history was something that people thought about but couldn't do. It's only been in very recent centuries that people have had their first view of the landscape from more than the tallest steeple or tree or whatever. And the two of you, in your respective ways, are dealing with the combining the technology of flight and the marvelous improvements in safety and reliability and efficiency and all the rest, with trying to reawake the sense of magic of this achievement that people have. And it's interesting to me. I was talking last night with Administrator Blakey, who during her time as FAA signed my pilot certificate, which I have in my pocket, and many others, and about the way in which a century ago, when people were first doing routine powered flight, there was the idea that anybody who was a flyer would also want to be a writer, and all writers would also want to be aviators, because the perspective of the world was so unique and so special. So now we're going to hear about what are the special perspectives that can make what is a routine, safe, but sometimes not ennobling experience something that is more exciting, more effective, and all the rest. So to discuss this, we have Marion Blakey, who of course was the head of the FAA and the NTSB, and now is the president and CEO of Rolls-Royce America, which plays, of course, a major role in international flight, and Max Rheiner, for a senior lecturer at Zurich University, who has a wonderful, imaginative product he's going to show us. So let me start with you, Marion Blakey, if I could. Tell us, from the rubric of what's next. You know this industry very well now from Rolls-Royce's perspective. What are you doing? What do you know about that we should be excited about, to think that the process of flight is going to be exciting again in some way, in addition to having its current virtues of safety and reliability?
Well, I think it is true that we do take safety and reliability honestly for granted. It's rather remarkable. I once asked if you could market safety in terms of any of our products, and we were told by the folks who do this for a living, branding, they said, no, it's assumed. That's not a distinguisher, never will be. But what we really concentrate on, of course, is what we think is coming, what is going to be exciting in terms of flight. And we see several things. The skies will continue to be more congested, and that means a couple of things. Electric, hybrid electric. Hybrid because right now batteries are too heavy. We'd all like to be doing what the car manufacturers are, but at the moment, it's the combination of the two. It's digital. It's the ability to download data and to do remarkable things in terms of how you can self-heal engines and aircraft. And of course, it's autonomy. And there we're talking about the opportunity, really, I think, for a tremendous democratization, if you will, of flying, because I believe personally we're going to go toward personal aircraft, being able to commute. Just think about having your own small aircraft, and that's going to depend on the things I just talked about, particularly autonomy, because not that many of us are going to be such terrific pilots that we want swarms of us up there. So all of those are the things that Rolls-Royce is developing and really putting huge investments in.
Thank you. So, and we're going to come back to some of the particular projects you have going. I'd like to ask Max Rheiner now tell us about Birdly. Tell us what you're doing and why you've come up with this product that has a very distinctive way of capturing the romance of flight.
So, first of all, I have to say the virtual skies have no limits, so it will never be crowded. And I started actually the project as a research project to find out what are the limits of virtual reality. And flying has for me a very mythological twist, because flying is somehow like the ultimate freedom. And I wanted to combine those aspects in a project where I check out how deep I can dive into virtual reality. And my goal was in that sense to simulate a bird, so that you can fly as a bird, the old human dream, like from Icarus. Yeah. And so I started to build a machine which actually I hope keeps up the promise. But actually I failed in the sense that nobody knows how a bird feels. So finally I had a problem, and I circumvented this problem in a way that every human, or nearly every person in this room, had once in their lifetime a dream about flying. Yes. And those kind of dreams I start to collect and shape them in a virtual reality experience, and that's the project you may see later.
And so are we going to see a brief clip of this? You want to do that now, or why don't we see that now?
Yep.
Let's see the clip of Burley. So this is what, so tell us what we're seeing.
So here you just see the virtual reality. So you see maybe it looks a little bit jaggy because you really see the image out of the eye of the pilot. So this image is captured, and it's actually a 3D scan of New York. But in the simulation, you really lay on a contraption where you can spread your wings and you can flap around. You have a head-mounted display and you have headphones. You feel the wind, which I generate actually with a fan. In the beginning, I even had the olfactory feedback device that you smell New York, the streets, but I abandoned it.
A feature bug.
Yes. No, I thought, it's better without. And so I tried to address all the senses that you really have the feeling you're flying. And actually, the best reaction I got from the people which are suffering from heavy vertigo because they really cannot stand it. They get wet hands. And so in that sense, it works very well.
So I'm going to have a segue combining what you've described, what I'm going to ask Marion and Blakey. First, I'm going to have a little promo about the dream of flight too, something that over the last 20 years I found just reliably entrancing about flying a small plane at low altitude across the United States is that you understand settlement patterns, geography, just the climate patterns and all the rest in a way that you can't from any other perspective. So if more people could do that, as you're suggesting with your autonomous vehicles, I think we would have a better understanding of the world. But a large number of technologies have to come together for the sorts of innovations you're talking about. There is the virtual reality technology, so people can more easily steer and follow highways in the sky. There are energy and sustainability technologies of making much cleaner engines, because aviation is, of course, an important problem in climate issues. There are just all the composite technologies of making the right kinds of equipment. Tell us about how these different technologies are coming together from Rolls-Royce's perspective, and also with your government background of what is about to happen next that we should be looking for, including some of your products.
Well, Rolls-Royce, when you think about what we do, as I say, every day for a living, huge Trent engines. If you're flying wide-body aircraft anywhere in the world, you're probably flying Rolls-Royce much of the time. We also, the vertical lift on the Joint Strike Fighter. So we're in some pretty big areas militarily as well as commercially right now. But as we see the future, electric is going to be tremendously important because it's green, and we will have difficulty the more flying goes on with both the noise and the issue of emissions. We're struggling with it a bit now. And then, of course, it's highly fuel efficient if you can get the battery technology to work. So let me show you something that we're developing along with a company called Aurora Flight Sciences and Honeywell. Yeah, take a look at this thing. 24 fans, guys. It's amazing. It's a hybrid electric, unmanned, vertical takeoff and landing. Jeez. And by the way, vertical takeoff and landing is important for all of us because you can put it down and take it up just about anywhere with almost no infrastructure, which is huge. And what we call the lightning strike here, and I know it doesn't look like it, but it's going forward in that photograph, not backwards. That's the shape of this. Can go 450 miles an hour, which is 50% faster than any helicopter right now. Now, this is DARPA. This is the Defense Advanced Research Agency that's backing this. And it's an X-plane. It's a prototype. But we think that a lot of the kind of composite materials, the capabilities, the electric component of this has huge potential down the road.
And let me ask you one follow-up about that. It is conventional wisdom in Silicon Valley over the last, say, 20 years saying, oh, if the aviation industry had progressed as fast as we have in semiconductors, planes would now hold 1 million people and a ticket would cost 1 penny and you would have no TSA lines and all these things. So, and their implication of that is that innovation is reaching a ceiling in aerospace. Is that the feeling from inside Rolls-Royce?
No, no. And, Silicon Valley.
Somehow the answer I was anticipating, but yes, but elaborate.
Although I have to tell you, the worlds are coming together,
Yeah.
and they're not colliding, they're meshing,
Yeah.
because we are highly dependent upon the digital future that lets us download right now 8 million data points from our aircraft as they're flying across the country, across the world right now. And we make the choice with the airline as to what's important to have streamed to the ground immediately and what you can hold on to. But we're getting to the point that they are, to some degree, flying computers.
Yep.
And the digitization of the future is going to be a critical aspect that we're collaborating on.
I have a question for Max about the role of flight, either real or virtual, in the human mind. And I'll give you two sort of introductions to this. One is, like most pilots, I'm basically afraid of heights. There's something, I don't want to get on a high diving board, but I love the sort of feeling of swimming through the sky or driving through the sky that you have in a plane. And I'll extrapolate this to, what have you learned about basic fear of flying, fear of being in the sky, and how that affects your project? Also, why does aviation safety have such an outsized role in our public imagination? 100 people die in cars every day in the United States, and that's routine, but an airplane crash, dominates the news for me. Tell us about the role of flight, fear, vertigo, safety, as you know about it imaginatively.
I would like to start this with the flying always had this metaphysical notion that flying is like a hybrid. So we humans are not made for flying. So when we ride a car, if you ride a horse or something, that's in our realm. But flying is sometimes seen as an arrogance that we elevate ourselves and get closer to heaven in all the days. And so we have to pay the price maybe for this, and that's always a little bit connected with that. But I think if you do a mistake when you are in the air, it's not forgiving. So when you do something wrong, then you just crash. And I have a good example for this. One of my students once did a project also about the dream of flying. And he thought the ultimate dream is to fly a helicopter. Like you mentioned, you can start, you can land wherever you want. And so he thought, this must be the ultimate freedom. I can go wherever I want. He started the license. He came back after 3 months, and he told me, I didn't found the ultimate freedom. I just found the fear of death.
So helicopters are a whole different thing. My original flight instructor was a Marine helicopter pilot, and so I was glad to learn fixed wings aircraft from him, but helicopters are a whole different thing. Also, the plane I now fly, a Cirrus SR-22, has a built-in parachute for the entire plane. In times of stress, you pull a red handle and come to the ground. But please proceed.
But maybe to go back to your first question, I think in the simulation, of course, it's totally safe. Nothing can happen at all. It's a simulation, but your senses are tricked. But as soon as people find out they have control, they're in charge, then the fear gets away.
And does it become like, so it's like the dream everyone has had as a kid of flying over your hometown, and it becomes a comfortable dream rather than a frightening dream?
Exactly, because you can start soaring, you get in a flow state, you have control, and when you're not crushed suddenly, then it's going to get a good feeling out of that.
So the natural question for you, Marion Blakey, is given your role both as NTSB head and then the FAA, how do you think of this issue of disproportionate fear about flying and the terrorist aspect of that, of why terrorists concentrate on airplanes as something they're going to, even though they could do much more damage at a shopping mall or any place else, but airplanes, why do you think airplanes have such an outsized role both in terrorist imagination and in civilian imagination, from the safety perspective?
Well, despite the fact that it is literally the safest form of transportation, even with the kind of terrorist acts that we have going now, periodically, and we have not lost a major hull aircraft in this country since really around 2001.
Yep.
But all of that said, I do think there is something for each of us deeply terrible about the idea of suddenly falling through the air. And terrorists can capitalize on that in a way that, you know, I mean, look at all the movies about flight accidents and aircraft crashes. And, you know, I mean, we all continue to be mesmerized by that, even though, as I say, it's one of the furthest things from reality that we have. But I think it's deep in the psyche. I really do.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So as well, as I mentioned before, when you're in an airplane and something happens, most of the people cannot even steer the airplane. You can't do anything. You're just
Right,
waiting
everyone should
for
become
the
a pilot.
crash.
Or
Yes.
everyone should look toward autonomous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because then, you know, and I mean, I think it's just terrific what's going on with the autonomy in cars, the driverless. And I do believe it's harder in the air, don't misunderstand me. But if we can crack a couple of things, part of it is cost, small, think Prius in the sky, you know, and if at the same time we can get to an air traffic control system that can handle it, because a lot of this will be below 500 feet. I mean, it will be, and of course, a lot of it will be drones, you know, package delivery, what Google's trying to do, all of that. But NASA, I have the privilege of being on the board of NASA right now, and we're working on a system that's more a web-based system, more reliant on, again, vehicles being able to send signals. All of this comes in together into a system which then begins to allow for congested spaces, a lot of requirements, a lot of strictures, in more open spaces, a lot more free form. But the air traffic elements of this, we're going to have to knock that before we get too much further.
To emphasize this safety point, you know, during most years in the United States, there are no fatalities on commercial airlines at all. So my argument to people is, if you spent all your life on an airliner, you would never die. You have to eat pretzels, and that would be bad, but you'd be physically safe. So I'm going to ask each of you, from your respective specialties and knowledge of flight, what's most exciting to you in the what's next panorama as you look at the technology of virtual reality and think of either the businesses you're developing or the training you're developing or just the sort of human expansion possibilities you're exploring? What's exciting to you about what you're doing?
For me, the technology, virtual reality, is very exciting because I can prototype and test actually cases which I'm not able to test in reality. For example, I started Birdley as an out-of-body experience. I don't know if maybe I have to elaborate this a little bit more. I'm interested in drones, but in a sense that you fly drones through telepresence. So you can fly real objects, but you use actually the Birdley simulator as an interface for it. And the virtual reality is like a step in between where you can check and train it.
And so the way that most drones are flown now is as if the person sitting in the box in Nevada is flying an airplane. It's just like the same controls as an airplane. So you would have sort of controls as if you were a bird, and that would fly the drone. That sounds interesting. And I should ask, before asking you about what's exciting to you, do you imagine drones carrying actual passengers anytime soon? Is that something that's on Rolls-Royce? How would that work?
I think it's very different when you're considering, you know, major airliner, 230 people on an aircraft. I don't see that happening too soon, although there will be a lot more augmentation in the controls of the kind of technology that autonomy offers. There's some theories, for example, that the Miracle on the Hudson, in fact, this has been run as computer simulations, Sully Sullenberger, if it had been a drone and he'd been simply watching, would have landed at Teterboro, not in the Hudson.
So have you seen the movie yet? That's actually the whole plot of the movie, and not as a spoiler, they say the simulations were faked. So anyhow, it's still worth seeing the movie.
Well, these are the things that are going to cause debates right now. But, you know, I do think it is very interesting to think about the possibilities of small aircraft being essentially autonomously piloted. It's a very safe prospect. I think the idea that companies like Uber could adopt this and come and pick you up and drop you off. And think about the, incredible flexibility that offers. And obviously, all of the kinds of things that can be safely delivered and brought, and the,
Yes.
convenience in life. I mean, I love it.
So before inviting questions, just briefly for you, what is most exciting to you about the next 5 or 10 years in aviation from what you see at Rolls-Royce?
Oh, from what I see at Rolls-Royce, I think it's going to be the fact that we are getting to a highly efficient, very, very stage of aircraft that, as we move forward, we are really going to find that the experience of flight, I think, is improving for the vast majority of us as passengers. It's, there's been a tough period, and we've all gone through the feeling of being herded into the cattle cars. But I honestly think there's a great deal that's going on right now that's attention to that, and the engines that we're putting on, as I say, in terms of noise, in terms of fuel efficiency, in terms of power, and therefore the ability to fly literally anywhere. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, great, thank you. So questions, who has yes? Yes, way in the balcony.
Hello there, my name is Kristen Cooper, and I work for a firm by the name of Sticks and Leaves in Indianapolis, Indiana. Thank you all for being here. Marion, my question is for you and Rolls-Royce. What are you and your leadership doing to mentor, train, and sponsor a diverse group of women for future research and leadership positions?
It's a great question, and I'll tell you, we all work hard on STEM and encouraging very young kids to get into the right academics, but so that they really can come into our industry, because it's a hard industry to, pardon me, James, parachute into without the right credentials. But we're also trying to keep women encouraged in the field that, again, we're still at the 20% level in terms of our engineering base and all of that. And by that, we're putting together employee resource groups. I'm very happy we're sponsoring a number of specialized groups that are really intended to mentor and to encourage people once they get in to stay, because that's almost as much of a challenge as not. And I do think the role models, listen, it's amazing. We have got several women CEOs right now. The head of the largest defense company in the world, Lockheed Martin, Marilyn Houston. Phoebe Novakovic is head of General Dynamics. We've got some pretty strong models for young women to look at. So I think we're making progress. It's just not fast enough.
Thanks. Yes, over here.
Jay Rothenberg, physician. How do you think airlines and airframe designers should be addressing the obesity crisis? Shall we ever be charging patients or travelers by body weight?
So, Max, do you have any differential rates in your simulator?
Actually, yeah, we have a weight limit, actually, but it's super high, so you never hit it.
Yeah, but come to America.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So what are the policy issues that you see? If you were still at FAA, how would you address this issue of differential pricing based on BMI?
They're hard problems, and then they're wicked problems. That's a wicked problem, because it would be very hard to, I think, equitably sort that out. It is something that I think airline policy is going to be addressing more and more. I don't really see the FAA making strictures about, what weight limits might be or what size seats and all of that.
My only political comment, it'd be really interesting to see how a President Trump would address this issue, given his stated views. Yes, go ahead.
We ready?
Yes.
Just a question. My name is John Roscos, and you're talking about autonomous aircraft. How is the tort bar ever going to allow autonomous anything in this country?
I'll start with you, Marion Blakey. From your institutional point of view, how would you deal with this at FAA?
Well, it's like, a lot of things. We can be a litigious society, and we tend to take things to the courts when there are accidents and problems. I think there'll be some early case law that will help establish, what the guidelines are. But all of this has got to be based on a foundation of safety that is inarguable. And I think if the industry proceeds as it has for its first 100 years, and that is safety is the foundation for any advance in technology, I don't think we're going to find that, you know, lawsuits are going to prove to be a insurmountable issue. I really don't.
So we have time for one more quick question, if there is one. And if not, I have a question for our two panelists. Yes, a young lady here. Yes.
Hi, it's Manohari Ramesh from Chicago. A question for you, because of your role in FAA and now in Rolls-Royce. FAA has, I'm involved in general aviation as well. I've been a private pilot. I've been learning for that. So I know that FAA has a bad rap for some things, not for safety, of course. They have a good role in that. I was just curious about your perspective now that you're in the private industry. What can FAA do better to help private aviation and general aviation in the US? Are they doing anything to make it better, or do you think they were a stumbling block, and now can you see something different that they can do?
Well, you know, I think the FAA struggles with trying to balance the equities of the flying public, people who are in all the airlines, and the large numbers of people out there who make up the backbone. And I think what really sets American aviation apart from any other place in the world, and that is the vast number of GA pilots. We've got 500 airports in this country. We've got a lot of open airspace. And trying to keep it as free to fly as possible. James wrote a book about the time I came into the FAA called Free Flight. And it was about the opportunities that are coming about. And a lot of what you were focused on, predicted, has advanced. Sometimes the FAA is an obstacle in this, or at least is slow. I think I would count it as slow. But they certainly, I mean, the number of pilots in the FAA, GA pilots, is huge.
Yeah. And thanks for what you have done to advance this vision. So before we end, so Max, any other thing you wish somebody asked you a question? Any other parting thought you want to give to our crowd? They should sign up for Birdly?
Actually, yeah, that's true, because when you saw it, you cannot imagine it. You really have to feel it to believe it. And so I invite you. We're going to have a show in 2 days in New York, and there you have the chance to try it out.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking Marion Blakey and Max Rheiner. Thanks.